If you are good at candlesticks, identifying candlestick formations, and you start to see particular patterns that you like, that you're confident can identify changes in trend, then by all means use that in combination with the chart pattern. Okay, look at the size of the body of a particular candlestick, and that'll give you an indication of how much momentum's there. So you have all kinds of controls that you're able to look at. And again, you can switch between chart patterns, Fibonacci, and power stats. One more thing that I wanted to show you is you do work with these indicator lists, that you make sure that you clean them up so that you're not getting too much information on the chart at one time. Again, as you become more advanced, maybe you want to put the Autochartist patterns on with the Fibonacci patterns, but a lot of people don't want to do that. Now, another thing that you can do if you're more advanced is, if you wanted to, you can slide through this in this edit area. Okay, you can control the width of these support and resistance lines as well as the colors, and you can also set this extension to true or false if you wanted to, and it will extend the lines out. Okay, so I changed that one to a true, and I can change this one to a true. I can click that on here and close this, and it should show me that my triangle pattern extended out. So that, again, some people like to see extensions. I prefer to look at extensions. You can see that before these lines cut off, now they've extended out. And this kind of gives you a better example of what I was talking about, how triangles come to this apex. And as this market moves inside here, eventually it's going to hit a point where it has to move. Sometimes it happens early, and then sometimes it happens late. All right, so the closer you can come to this apex, that's where you should start licking your chops, thinking this thing's going to move. So the more patterns that you can get, or the more markets that you can get that have these triangle patterns, if you combine those with a really good volatility indicator, you should be able to create some high probability setups. And that's what all you really want to do, is give yourself an edge. Autochartist plugin for MT4 gives you an edge because you can look at live data. All right, and at the same time, become really good at looking at these patterns and understanding how these patterns work. And then coupled with these quality indicators, you can set up some really high probability setups. And then using, again, this target zone with the power stats or Fibonacci targets, you can have the whole complete package there. You can have find ways to set stops, find ways to set targets, and then apply your strategies. Like I said, are you going to figure out where you're going to trail? Trail under a previous bar, under a previous candlestick, under a previous zone, maybe on a breakout above. So you do have options, and you can, again, study and experimentation are the key. And that's it. I've covered the main points, and I think you should be all set to move forward with it. It's a great program. It's very simple to use, as I showed you. There's, you have your drop and drag options. It's very easy to load, and with MT4, you have, a library in here that'll help you understand some of these patterns, some of the things I might have mentioned, that I assumed maybe you knew. But you always have that opportunity to look and see, what help's available. So let me take a look at, see if we've got some questions here that I can answer. Let me drag this thing out here. Any questions, Vet, that I should be able to?
Yes, we've actually got quite a few questions. Let's have a look.
All right.
Right. From Marco.
Marco,
can you hear me, James? Yes.
Yes, I can.
Right, he says, what would be the best time frame to get more accurate signs from Autochartist? The best time frame?
Well, it's not. I can answer that pretty easily, because I am a pattern price time kind of guy. It's not necessarily a rule for Autochartist, but you have to remember that the smaller your time periods, the more noise you're going to get. So if you think about it, you start from a tick chart and go all the way up to, say, a monthly chart or an annual chart. You're going to see that there's a lot of noise and a lot of false moves on the smaller charts. So the smaller your time period, there's a trade-off. You're going to get a lot of action, okay, and it gives you more opportunity to capture profits, provided that you're a good trader. Okay, at the same time, you have to have the mental edge to accept the fact you're going to have more losses on a smaller chart. So the trade-off is, if you're going to work with a 15-minute chart, for example, then try to get the length up to a high level. Don't use a low length. Study and experiment, and the longer the length you can get for a 15-minute chart, that gives it a little bit more weight. So there's like a bit of an inverse relationship between the time period that you use and the length that you use also. So again, if you're using a 15-minute chart, be prepared to trade more often, but if you have a pattern that is, they say 50, 60, maybe even 100 periods long, then you tend to get stronger moves. And again, learn what the, I use the term noise loosely, I mean. The clarity indicator that Autochartist has does look for noise in the marketplace. But at the same time, you can also look at your ATR signal to see what kind of noise is in the marketplace. That basically measures the movement in the time period you're looking. So if you were looking at a 15-minute chart, for example, and you wanted to put to see what the noise was or what the average movement is on that chart, then you can look at ATR of a 15-minute chart, and that gives you an idea of where you should place your stops. And that's kind of how the power stance works also, where it studies historical volatility. So again, to answer your question, 15-minute charts are fine to start with, but use a longer length. And otherwise, all chart patterns are manageable. You just have to remember there's going to be a trade-off between the amount of trades you get and the amount of action. Okay, apologize, I see there somebody couldn't see it. I don't know what happened before. Let's see, let me go down here. Which of the chart patterns or fib patterns are more high probability trades? Well, I think what the ABCD, first of all, that's the basic building block pattern. So I think what you want to start with that one. Learn the real simple pattern first, and you'll see that that's a fairly accurate pattern. Okay? And so after you look at once you master that ABCD pattern, then you can move up to the extensions and the retracement patterns. And then as you master those, then you move up to your butterfly and your Gartley. So I think that as far as probability is concerned, a lot of that has to do with, again, the time frame, as I mentioned before. If you're using 15-minute charts to find Fibonacci patterns, you're going to probably have lower probability than if you used a longer term time frame. So to answer your question, I would do a progression of learning the ABCD first, and then working up to a Gartley in a slow process. In other words, look at ABCD on a 15-minute, look at it on a 30, a 60, a 240, a 1440. And then once you find that time period that you're comfortable with in terms of how many opportunities you get per day, because you remember a lot of trading, success in trading has to do with how many trades you get per day. It's not about being extremely accurate where you're trying to pick one trade and be right all the time. If you're a high frequency trader, and I don't mean the guys that are flipping for pennies, but you should in any kind of a system, you should get 3 to 5 trade suggestions per day. What's good about Autochartist is sometimes you'll get 1,000 per month, so that's basically it's quite a few, but that's scattered amongst a lot of markets. But if you were, for example, wanted to trade the euro, you should get 3 to 5 setups per day. and then from there work with your time periods, work your 15-minute up to 1440, and test each pattern, and you'll see. But the main thing is learn the ABCD first and then work up. I don't know why the expert advisors button is off, so that answers that question. Can you combine Autochartist pattern recognition with EAs? Not familiar with that, but I would think that is if EAs is a price program and Autochartist is a pattern program, then I think you can combine them. What you want to do is if you're gonna do any kind of combining, I try to do it with something that's different. Like, for example, Autochartist is patterns. If I try to look at markets in terms of pattern, price, and time. All right. And if I'm going to look at prices, then I'm going to look for clusters. In other words, a moving average combined with a trend line, combined with a Autochartist target, combined with a power stats target. I'm looking for clusters that are going to tell me that's where the masses are, that's where the crowd is, that's the brick wall that I'm not going to be able to get through. Okay? If I only have one target, I'll play for a breakout through that target. All right? If I have two there, I'll be a little bit more cautious. But if I have three different independent ways to come up with a number, I'm going to be extremely tight, and I'll have a very quick trigger finger if the market does react at that area. Okay. Let's see here. Do you have to wait for breakout strength before making trade? No, and that's because depends on how you do your analysis. But if you're working with, I'll show you on this chart first because it's just a little bit easier right now. If you follow the progression from emerging patterns, like in this case, if you follow the progression in an emerging pattern, and you start to see it shows up on this list as an emerging pattern, okay? You can get in as soon as you see it's an emerging pattern, all right? And then play for the breakout. You can see that we've added this feature here where we've extended these lines. So it's an emerging pattern when you have these candlesticks, but once it crosses here, it becomes completed, okay? So keep that in mind. So when it pops up on this emerging list, if you can see that you have an exit, you can start the trade early in anticipation of the breakout. So that's the benefit of working with the emerging patterns, okay? So yes, you can start it before the breakout. I would say that involves a little bit more skill than waiting for the breakout, but your reward is huge. Your trade-off is that it doesn't break through and it reverses on you. But if you can calculate that risk, then you can take the trade. I always trade when I can see an exit. So if I'm getting a signal here that it's emerging and I can see that that's 2 bars after this top, I'll take the quick out if I'm wrong over this old top. All right? As long as I can see my exit first, I'll get in anywhere in the marketplace. So right, that's a really good question. Go from emerging, and if you can see that you have an exit and you see there's momentum in the trade, jump the gun and get in before it becomes a completed pattern. That's an excellent question. I usually bring that up, so thanks for bringing that up. Appreciate it. Also, does MACD work better than any other indicator? Well, believe it or not, I still chart the markets by hand. I'm totally old school. I'll use technical stuff, technical programs, but my weekends and nights are spent drawing charts. It's a form of relaxation. So I like to work with open, high, low closes. So that's why I like to work with bar charts. When I want to go to Autochartist and I use that for pattern recognition, I'm looking at bar charts. Okay, I don't like MACDs too much because it smooths out data. So that's my personal opinion. So I can't really tell you if it works better than any other. I do think the triangle pattern does work extremely well. You're going to get whipsawed sometimes in it. That's just part of the game. That's the cost of doing business. But I would say if I had to pick two between an MACD and a triangle pattern, I'd take the triangle pattern, or more classic bar patterns. Anything that deals with smooth data, I tend to back away from, because I said my background is in old school patterns like triangles, rectangles, squares, things like that. So that's just my personal preference. Can I use the pattern on news? Well, sure. I mean, as a technician, I believe the technicals precede the fundamentals. So if I see a triangle forming, in my head I'm saying this market's going to break out. And if news happens to come out, I'll play the news. That's the way it goes. So yes, I would play it that way. I'd go from chart pattern to news rather than go from news to chart pattern. These patterns, if news hits, the patterns, if you need 2 hours for a pattern to form on an hourly chart, if news hits, you're not going to have any time. News tends to work on a 1 minute, 2 minute, 5 minute chart, unless it's going to be news that changes, for weeks, like, for example, an oil leak or a war or something. But if you're going to do quick news that gets reported, you're working with smaller time periods. But if you look for triangles, you can just sit back and wait for the news to come out. So that's why I like it, because my technicals, I believe they precede the fundamentals. They're telling me something's going to happen. Look at the currency markets all week. They're saying nothing's going to happen until it happens. So basically the market was sideways. Wouldn't have mattered what you had on. There's no momentum. But now that they seem to be closer to a resolution, traders are getting a little bit more confident and they're making their moves. And that's why you see that action in the currencies today. Break out in two triangles. And that's what happens is look at the triangles. They're going to tell you that something big is going to come out. That's my opinion. Geez, we're over time here. If this channel is working in 240-minute chart, do you move your trade in that direction or stay with the trade? I tend to analyze top down and I trade bottom up. So what I do by that is I look for daily first. What's the trend in the daily? Do I have a pattern? Do I have a breakout in the daily? If I have a breakout in the 240-minute chart, then sometimes I'll drop down to a 5-minute and I'll use that as my entry. So I might have a trade triggered on a bigger chart, the top, the higher chart, say on a pyramid, and then what I'll do is I'll get in on a 5-minute because I can keep my risk really small at that point. Do you move? And as far as I think you said, do you move your trade? I think you meant stop. Yeah, you can do that too. If you get in on a bigger trade, a bigger time period, you can use a smaller time frame to also set the stop. But remember now, the two hardest things to do, and again, this is speaking from experience, two hardest things to do is to trail a stop and to add to a winner. So if you can conquer those, if you can figure out a way to stay with the trade without messing up the position, if it means using a smaller period trail, then by all means do it. But that's a good question though. That to me is I tend to look at how solid a bottom is. I would say a lot of times it's not the time period, but really how solid a bottom is. I'll trail my stop under a solid bottom or something that's formed on a bigger time period chart.
Jim, we're running out of time, so I think we're going to wrap it up. Thanks very much for your time once again this week. Next week's going to be the last in our Essential series, our webinar Essential series, where you're going to give us an overview of everything we've discussed over the last 5 weeks, and we're really looking forward to that one. Hope you're going to have a great weekend, and yes, we'll chat soon.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with everybody, and I appreciate you all coming and sticking around, and it's great questions today. I'm going to save these, and we'll figure out a way to post them. We are going to post this on the website, a tape of this, or not a tape, I'm old school. a digital recording. And I'll get to these questions, and we'll figure out a way to get those to you. Thank you very much. Have a great weekend.